Hello again. So we got another example of completing the square, which isn't too bad. This is actually a pretty easy example. You could do this through factoring, you could do this through a lot of different methods, but I want to try this with completing the square. So basically what we have to do is get everything without an x on one side and everything with an x on the other. When we do that, now in order for completing the square to work properly, we have to get everything out of the x squared. We can't have it as 2x squared, it has to be 1x squared. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor out a 2 from both of these terms. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add something to kind of manipulate the equation. And here's what we're going to do. Plus something on that side equals 2. Now when I distribute factor something out of the parentheses, when I'm going to put in my missing link on my right hand side, I'm going to leave it inside that quantity. Now what I do is I take this term 2, or the term with the x, and I always divide it by 2, and I figure out what it's equal to, and it's equal to 1. Then I square it. And I like writing that step out. I like writing whatever it is in parentheses, and I like writing the square afterwards, and then I like writing the answer after that. And the answer is 1. So 1 goes inside my blank spot. 1 goes inside my blank spot. No. See, that's actually not true. You put in 1, you put in 1. Yeah, but I didn't actually put in 1. And the reason why is because this number is not actually a 1. It's a 2 times a 1. So in order to offset that balance, this is still the same. I never change it. But if I'm going to add a number here, fine, I've got to add the same number here. But it's not a 1. It's 2 times 1. So actually the number that goes inside there, or in that blank spot, is a 2. So something to be wary about. That's the additional step when you factor something out. As long as you keep that in mind, it's okay. If you put a 1 in, I promise you it's not going to match up if you try factoring or using the quadratic formula or anything like that. You're like, what's going on? I thought I did it right. Well, kind of, but you neglected a step. So I got y. A negative 2 plus 2 goes away, so it's just 0. So, woo! That's going to be easy. But then again, this wasn't too bad of a problem. And this is going to be 2. And what it turns into is x. And then I always refer to this part right here, where I point to my students, did you do this step? And I'm like, no. I'm like, do it, and then you'll figure out, oh, it's positive 1 squared. That's it. That's how you figure it out. Now, there is actually a value that exists outside of this quantity. It's plus 0. There's nothing there. But why that's useful is very simple, because I want to figure out what my vertex is, because this is called vertex form, so the specific behind it is to figure out your vertex. Yes, you could figure out your x-intercepts if you, if you set what you're supposed to, if you set your y equal to 0, and then you divide by 2, and you take the square root of both sides and do the plus or minus and subtract 1. That's not my concern. My concern is trying to show you how to get the vertex in vertex form. So I know on that last example I could have done that. Why didn't you? Because I just didn't feel like doing it. Because one thing at a time. So my vertex is at negative 1, 0. So when I graph it, oh, that's kind of weird. My vertex is also a solution. The graph is going to go upwards because it's positive. For anybody who's interested, the y-intercept is actually at 2. It's my c value. And it actually goes in like that, in that direction. So my vertex is at negative 1, 0, and it kind of expands out. We haven't done this in a while, so I'm going to go ahead and reiterate this step. My domain and my range. My domain is the same thing as my linear functions, as my absolute value functions, and as my, with the exception of the special case in linear functions, absolute value functions and all quadratic functions. It's negative infinity to infinity. The range is from 0, actually it includes the number 0, so it's a square bracket, all the way to infinity. Goes up. So that's a brief introduction of completing the square. They're not difficult problems, but it's definitely a good starting point when you get to more difficult problems. Fractions, as long as you just do what you're supposed to do, you write this out, square it, etc., then the fractions aren't so bad either, but you got to be wary about them. That's it for now with completing the square. Have a good day. Goodbye.